I think most of my questions have been answered since I've just been listening. The one question that I had is just more of a clarification regarding the staff report. At the very end of it, you mentioned sort of suggest that one of the benefits is that there are sidewalks on both sides of the street, encouraging pedestrian travel. And I guess I was assuming that that was a requirement of our development. Is that not required?
It may not be a requirement, but I requested it in the planning comments and a connection so you could traverse through the site. So as part of the pedestrian connectivity, I did request it and the petitioner did respond.
Okay, so but to be clear, it's not required. I mean, you requested it was provided. Does our code need to change to make that
No,
a
I believe
requirement?
I would have to double check, but I think they would want sidewalks. The engineering department would request sidewalks throughout the site.
Okay, I just wanted to put that on my to-do list of things to be asking for if it turns out that's not part of our standard practice and rules. Let's see if there was anything else I wanted to address. I guess another clarification from what came up in the comments and in the questions. So the sanitary, the sewage, that is, my understanding that it is not, there's enough capacity currently there to handle what the site is producing. Is that what I heard? I just want to make sure I heard that correctly.
Yeah, I just looked up the previous sanitary sewer, and I believe the utilities are adequate to accommodate the proposal.
Okay, that was one piece. And then in terms of what we require in terms of mitigation, maybe I'll just follow up with that later, so I understand that system better. Okay. Thank you.
Further discussion? Commissioner Sauvé?
I just want to go one more follow-up with the basements. I know that the grading plan, we talked about walkouts, at least on the eastern side of the property. Are the center connected units also walkouts? I'm looking at the kind of site section. It looks like they might, just to understand like the capacity of some of those. It's like the
Yeah, there's not
proposed finished grade
a
in the middle.
walkout
like a
unit
ledge.
like you would think their view out in the center and along that northeastern edge in order for us to basically meet the grades that exist, either to preserve the trees at the edge or the trees at the central location of the site.
So walk me through that again.
So-
One linear line from the connected units and the eastern line of
Yep,
freestanding
so
homes.
the central block of connected units.
Yep.
If you were standing at the sidewalks at the roadway, you'd slightly rise to the front doors of the units, you'd go into the unit. That first floor elevation is roughly 4 to 5 feet above the grade behind the unit, so that you basically have the exposed basement foundation there. And the reason to do that is to get that grade to drop in that area to preserve the trees that exist central to that block.
Okay.
And then on the eastern side, you're talking on the northeast corner, we kind of do the same thing with the building foundation so that we can drop down to the existing grade because that northeast corner's lower point.
And then from a building standpoint, is there intended for egress windows or any sort of windows in those basement foundations? Other than, your typical kind of transom?
Our intent was to make the basement, a normal 8-foot, which is kind of a typical basement. If we do that, we're required by the building code to put an egress window in. So yes, there would be. However, when we talk about the whole reason why, and we could probably have a long discussion on, the basements, I want them for storage. And I think everyone loses sight of the fact that you're not supposed to finish the basement without a permit. I mean, that's what you have a building department for. And we're putting it right in the actual documents that you cannot finish them. They know that right up front. So it's not that, oh gee, I have something that maybe could be turned into a habitable space. It's right in there that they can't. The other is we just make it 8 feet 5 inches, 7 feet 5 inches, and then it can't be finished, and it's just the world's tallest crawl. So It just
I
is
understand.
being more conventional, trying to be upfront and say, let's make this so people have a good storage space, because people have stuff, and rather than set it outside or fill their garage and have their cars set out and people complain, is I'm trying to give the people storage in a 2,000 square foot house. Because it costs
So,
about the same
yeah.
whether I make it usable for storage or not, so
I
that's
guess
the whole
that's
reason.
been part of the conversation, is trying to understand that 2,000 square foot, you know, if you had a 1,000 square foot footprint, first and second floor, 3,000 would be the basement finishing, and what we're reading in the language right now, Chris, can you clarify, is that the basement is counted as square footage, but it's allowed to go above 2,000 square feet. And what I'm hearing from you is the language says you can't finish the basement, so you can't go above 2,000 square feet.
Correct. That's where we're proposing it.
You're open to that as the condition
Oh,
in the
absolutely.
language, that the basements cannot be finished.
That's correct. We propose that, and we want to put it right in there. We've said
But
that.
per how the city counts it,
From a staff perspective, we looked into this, and where we're going to find difficulty is, yes, they would have to come in for a building permit, but not everybody actually comes in for a building permit to finish their basement. Then we're going to get ourselves into enforcement of, okay, they finished a basement, staff is now going to have to enforce on a finished basement. I did have a brief discussion with their assessor's office. They do not count anything above the basement as part of their floor area. They assess for a finished basement, but they don't count it in their calculations. So staff thought it might be easier, at least in the future, for a building department, planning department, zoning enforcement, that to allow those finished basements, you know, I just don't know if we're going to be able to enforce, or if our building department's going to recall, they're going to have to put a hold and deny any type of finished basement permit that comes in.
but it sounds like part of the homeowners association, that language says you cannot finish your basement. And if a building permit did come in, I mean, it's always an enforcement condition, but if a permit did come in, it would have to go through zoning compliance review.
That's correct.
It would look at the PUD and understand that the permit would get denied.
If they went through
If
the
they went through-
official channels.
Right.
Yes.
Which, I mean, in all of these circumstances, we have enforcement
Yes.
issues. It only
Yep.
happens when there's a complaint
Right.
sort of circumstance. So if that language is true and we're trying to hold to certain square footage intensities, I actually feel more comfortable that the language is in there to catch it if you go through the proper channels. I think in all circumstances of the city, people can find alternative ways, and we can only enforce what we know. Okay, that helps a little.
Commissioner Mills.
Staff, we do have R1E, another R1E district on the north side of town. Does that include basements?
It does. And that was under the previous definition of habitable space. They constructed basements that were not habitable space, that exceeded the 2,000 square feet. We have had numerous requests for people to now come in and finish those basements. And it's been a challenge on how to respond to that. So what we have, as you heard the petitioner refer to it, they are finishing many of those basements with a shorter ceiling height that makes it illegal to finish those basements in the future. It's a messy example of how we're trying to clarify the language in this circumstance.
Can you recall, I don't know that, I'm not, no, is there, I don't know that there was anybody on this table that was around when we established the R1E district. Oh, yes, our chair, see? About what the intention was.
The intention at that time, I don't remember ever having the conversation about basements. I think I actually don't think it ever came up. And my thinking behind it was like any other district, that they are able to finish their basements. I think ultimately the goal was to get smaller, to get smaller homes built, smaller units to be built. Whether a basement was finished or not, I don't think that really ever came up. This is the first I'm hearing about this conversation. And now, because I've sold several of the properties on Pontiac Trail at North Sky, that makes a whole lot more sense as to why they're building them the way they are. But I I don't remember ever recalling that conversation. I think we just treated it like every other zoning district.
Got it. So what I see, right, is that there's this tension here between what are the public benefits and what's the risk of leaving it as it is, right, versus what are the benefits then that become of the PUD? So, and you got, I can lay it out, or I can defer to staff, who I'm sure has grappled with this to some extent. Like, because that's what I'm trying to weigh in my mind. There are the benefits of this PUD in terms of the stormwater retention, especially from the off-site requirement, that's above and beyond. And there's the natural area preservation benefits, right? It's the same number of units in either situation. There is the benefit of having a different housing product here in terms of the duplexes or the attached units that we couldn't do in the R1E underlying. But at least as developed, there's got to be a price differential by it being able to finish your basement versus not. And so in the existing R1E zoning, right, there particularly for those houses at the perimeter, right, those would be more affordable units because you could not finish the basement under our current ordinance. I want to share with like the people listening on TV and the people here, like there are always trade-offs in this, and I really don't know what the right one is, but these are the kind of things, lucky us, that we get to grapple with on a regular basis. So I will shut up. I'm concerned about the basement thing just because, again, a potentially 3,000 square foot, well, no, you can say that you can't finish it, but if you are allowed to build it to the height where people might, like, that's, I don't know how to think about this.
Just to add a little bit of my personal experience is that I would estimate that 75% of people who finish their basements, whether they hire a contractor or they do it themselves, will not pull a permit. Sorry, Mr. Leonard, but that is my experience when I do research on a property and I look at the building permits that are pulled. I am pleasantly surprised when one is pulled. It's a surprise to me when one is pulled.
Address
So-
is Mr. Milstein.
No. So even though Mr. Heisler is saying this will be in the association bylaws and the city won't issue permits, those basements, some of those basements will be finished. And I can totally understand where the staff's perspective is. All right, they started finishing their basement. How are we going to enforce that they've taken it apart? I don't know the answer to that question. Commissioner Mills.
So the solution there is to say that the way that we identify square footage, which includes all of the floors, including the basement, right? You can't exceed that, right? What this also means, though, is that these people can't put an addition onto their house. If they max out at 2,000 feet, right? They can't add a sunroom in the back. They can't, right? And so, again, though, one of the benefits of the benefit of the R1E is to have reasonably sized homes, says the woman who lives in 1,300 square feet, right? Like reasonable, a smallish footprint house. And so that's tricky.
Address the one as far as how you enforce it. If they did it, it's right in the bylaws that they have to remove it if they finish a basement, and the association by state statute has assessment powers, and that they'll assess against the homeowner to remove it. I mean, it's right in there. That's what I planned on doing. I didn't plan on making it a problem for everyone else. It's right there. It's law, basically. It's, a statute. Here it is. Here's the bylaws. We make them. We have to live with that, and the people buy it. They know it. Will it decrease the value of it some? Yeah. But I think we should think about how people live and have the storage for all the different things kids have. You don't really want play sets setting out the little type things in the winter and that. You'd rather see them inside, downstairs where kids have some activity, that type of thing. That's what I'm looking for, not livable space. And I'm willing to make the accommodations not to put it on the city to do. And you can do that with assessment powers with condominium documents.
Mr. Leonard? No. Commissioner Sauvé?
We've seen these housing typologies before presented to us, and with that square footage cap, finishing the basement or not, it's protecting the scale that we're seeing in the neighborhood. There's also kind of, there, within the PUD, the single-story homes lining part of the outside perimeter as part of it. So there is kind of some tiered scale within this property that I find a good balance. And that there is kind of that distribution of different home typologies. So we've got the 2-story, the 1-story, and the connected. And so I want to get clarifying questions about the basements, just to kind of know the circumstance, but I'm not concerned about the basement as the condition of this PUD losing a benefit. I think the natural features as the benefit to this and the progress that it's made is the substantial part. And I think single story, 2-story, and attached is a great diversity within this development that can, put a lot of different people together too. So it's interesting to hear, especially when it's coming up for the zoning, maybe even for, future when we talk about these zoning areas. But for this one, I feel comfortable, with how the basement circumstance is going to play out. It's just my.
Commissioner Hammerschmidt?
Thank you. So clearly, I was not here for any of the previous discussions of this project, so I'm trying really hard to come up to speed. And I just keep thinking about what it would be like to live here, especially I have small children, and the only entrance point is on Packard Road. I guess I'm also thinking this is proposed to be a PUD, and there should be public benefit. Are there other public benefits that we're not thinking about? And I'm also not a landscape architect, but I'm wondering if this has come up before about the potential of any of these stormwater retention ponds becoming some sort of usable park space. Have you guys had those discussions? Or any sort of, I don't know what the park space, if there's any sort of park space dedication, or if it's a fee.
Yeah, I don't have controls I would toggle down, but there is some open space on site.
Okay.
Yeah, if Mr. Culver could, I think, toggle to a couple of slides.
Okay. Those just look like trees to me. So.
There.
Okay.
So on the west side of the site, the central west side, there's also a connecting path, but up in the, is it the southeast corner also?
There's nothing to the surrounding neighborhoods. Is it possible to make connections to the surrounding neighborhoods, or is that just, I'm just struggling with the insularity of this and having to, to access Burr Park, you have to go out onto, if that's the only way to do it, that's the only way to do it, I guess I'm thinking about trying, living here and pushing a stroller down Packard, and the sidewalks don't look great.
Yeah, I guess I would just from the staff perspective, it's something I think it came up in maybe in the area plan, I'm not sure, but I think the question was raised. I think the petitioner had referenced just the barriers because it's surrounded by
Right.
individual lots. There aren't no public
That's what I-
easements or right-of-way easements that are easy to connect to. I don't know if you've had any further investigation of that.
Yeah, so we have a couple of areas that don't encumber the site with detention that are open on the west side and then up by the entranceway. We do have walks surrounding or on each side of the private roadways. They're not public roadways, they're private roadways, so I'm not certain that the ordinance states you have to have walks on both sides, but we have those. We have a walk that bisects the central block of the property. It had come up with the previous plans, area plan, the site plan that was ultimately denied, and this plan to work to try to achieve an easement on one of the private properties adjacent to the site so that there could be cut through to those neighborhoods. And we haven't had anybody come forth and mention that. We have talked about it at many meetings when we've had our citizen participation meetings and so on, but nobody's come forth with that. We did hear at citizen participation meetings that there was a concern with school-aged children walking through the neighbors' yards, where we noted that there are existing fences that would prohibit that perceived nuisance. As far as using stormwater detention for Parkland area. Because this is a drainage district, the county has specific requirements and easements that will encumber those areas that will prohibit many things. And it also kind of dictates where the landscape plantings have to be and so on too.
Thank you.
One other thing I'll mention is, part of the project, we are proposing the Parkland contribution as well.
Further discussion? So, Mr. Covert, I have a quick question. Actually, maybe it's not so quick. Can you, just because we've talked quite a bit, can you go through and just give us bullet points of all the public benefits of this site? I don't need full explanations. I want to make sure that I'm not forgetting any of them.
Yep, so the PUD benefits, the public benefits of this PUD, we were identifying as diverse housing typology with the attached units and the limited density and the single-family homes. We were looking at the natural features preservation, woodland landmark trees, including the substantial natural features maintenance plan. We were looking at the stormwater management as exceeding the requirements and addressing historical flooding issues.
Thank you. Further discussion? Are we ready for a vote? All right, it looks like we are. Let's do a roll call vote. Mr. Leonard.
Okay, so the motion is as presented in the staff report with the added condition that the historic house on the property remain on site until a grading permit is issued to provide an opportunity for moving the house and/or other preservation efforts.
And it's both of the motions that we have before us.
Yep. Commissioner Milstein,
Yes.
Commissioner Mills,
Yes.
Commissioner Gabrandal,
Yes.
Commissioner Abrams,
Yes.
Commissioner Ackerman,
No.
Commissioner Briggs,
Yes.
Commissioner Hammerschmidt, Commissioner Sauvé.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. All right, moving on to regular business. The first item on our agenda is 10A, Shell Station Plan Unit Development Modifications for City Council approval. We will start with the petitioner presentation. You'll have 10 minutes to present. We will then move on to staff report, public hearing, and then discussion.
I'm Todd Quattro with Quattro Construction, designer. Let me find it here. So the proposed proposition is to add on to the addition, add an addition onto the existing station that's sitting at Ann Arbor, Saline Road and Eisenhower. Right at the very beginning, the existing building was built in '96, I think, is when we've originally built, and modified again a few years ago where they put Tim Hortons. They had the approval of a PUD back then and did some public benefit. The area we're going to add on to is to the south of the building, and we propose to enclose the open detention pond and put in underground stormwater detention along with the treatment facility. The proposed addition's about 4,712 feet. There will be an office situated on the top of the building for a second story with for the owner, just simply for him to sit up there. And there's going to be 720 foot of additional storage added for the gas station. He's having a little trouble right there with storage at the moment. It's getting a little inside the store as far as that goes. We've had a couple citizen participation meetings, and we had some suggestions come up from the neighbor, Cranbrook, to the south. I believe they provided a letter stipulating such. Presently, there are 26 spaces. 20 are required. There's 6 over the minimum requirement. We're going to construct over, let me go back up, over the one area right here where there is 8 spaces, eight car spaces there. And we're going to create 14 new spaces. And that would be by enclosing the detention facility, the detention pond over to the corner. We're going to modify the area. We're putting in some additional landscaping. We got additional right-of-way trees and street trees. 2 additional street trees, bioretention in the area, and we're providing some pedestrian walkway up to the area. So we are enclosing 8, and we are, excuse me, one second, and we are creating 21 new spaces. The new development calls out for 14 spaces, of which we calculated all retail. There is 800 square feet that is just going to be primarily designated to the owner for his storage in the back of the building. That's pretty much it.
Great. Thank you very much.
Okay.
We'll now head over to Mr. Chang for staff report.
Yeah, just to follow up on that, we do also for the parking counts, we count the pump station. So they've got some pump stations there that is, we've counted 12 additional parking spaces. So the pumps count as far as the parking goes. It does meet with the previously approved supplemental regulations as far as area, height, parking regulations. So there were no changes to the supplemental regulations. They're also requesting a landscape modification to screen the proposed new parking lot. Fuel stations are a little different. They require 15 feet width with a 30-inch wall. A typical right-of-way screening would require 10 feet and a 30-inch type of hedge berm or wall, and they are meeting that with 10 feet and a hedge berm wall. In this case, it's going to be a berm that's 30 inches that, at least from a landscaping perspective, does meet the screening intent from the right-of-way to the proposed parking lot. And I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to open up the public hearing. If there are any members in the audience who wish to address the Planning Commission, please step forward, state your name and address for the record. You'll have up to 3 minutes to address the Planning Commission.
Good. My name's Alex Deek, and I represent Cranbrook Village Shopping Centers, which is that property located on the northeast of the Shell station. So I'm here today because we have some concerns regarding the application. What we see are as some inaccuracies in the traffic study report and some omissions that we think contribute to some safety concerns related to traffic and parking on the site. As the applicant said, they're adding nearly 5,000 square feet as an addition. If you're not familiar, this is already a very congested parking area. And our main concern is in the traffic study, they don't mention, first it's inaccurate. It says it's only a 1,500 square foot addition. This is much larger. We anticipate a lot more use, a lot more traffic. It also doesn't mention the Tim Hortons drive-through restaurant. And so we're concerned that these things weren't properly accounted for. And that the parking spaces, and I know Chris mentioned some of those are the gas pump lanes. Nothing in the traffic study kind of mentioned how those lanes are going to interact. Those are going to be moving cars and not, stationary regular parking spots. Mark will also add to this, but we're missing some dimensional measurements in the parking lot, and so it's hard to tell actually what the capacity for parking is here. This is something. We're just concerned about safety here in an already congested area, in a big addition. Related to that, as I've said, Cranbrook is located on the east side. There's a steep slope leading up to the Shell station. I think there's a concern that if there's inadequate parking on this site, people are going to start parking on Cranbrook's site and walk up this steep slope. We think that's just dangerous. It's not, provided for pedestrian cross traffic that way. At a minimum, we would ask that a fence goes up. That was brought up at the, I think it was brought up at the citizen participation meeting. I think the contractor thought it was also a good idea. It's something we would like to see added at a minimum. Related to the supplemental regulations and kind of this PUD modification approval, we just don't think it meets the standards. Again, there's a lot of inaccuracies and missing information in the traffic report. The site plan doesn't have certain dimensional requirements. And we can't get a sense of how the congested parking is going to be fixed on this site. And I think that really shifts the burden to neighbors like Cranbrook to have to deal with people parking on their site and potential liability with that pedestrian cross-traffic. So we don't think it actually meets the PUD standard of review, which requires, a safe assessment of pedestrian vehicular traffic, and the supplemental regulations from when it was approved in 2013 as well. We would ask that, these things be considered a little bit further, maybe a more detailed report provided addressing these issues, and again, at a minimum, at least a fence in between the two sites.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Good evening. My name is Mark Drain. I'm an architect with Rogovoy Architects. My address is 32500 Telegraph Road, Bingham Farms, Michigan, Suite 250. I was asked to review the set of drawings on behalf of Cranbrook. I'm opposed to this development because I don't believe that the applicant has provided all the information that's required for both the staff, the planning commission, or the public to understand the application and the proposal. Usually I'm usually on the other side of the table. I'm always putting these plans together, and the first thing I do is I go to the checklist. What's on the checklist? Let's provide that. Their proposals do not include the ALTA survey, existing and proposed contours, dimensional layout. Specifically, we were talking about the parking spaces at the pump. There's 12 parking spaces that are being counted. They're not shown on the plan. I'd like to see how those work with dimensions. I think that would be appropriate for everybody to see those. There's no photometric plan. That was on the list. I don't see that. Vertical sections to the buildings, perspective renderings of the buildings, dimension floor plans. I can't even calculate the square footage of the floor plans because I don't believe that they were drafted correctly. There's no indication of outdoor sales on this site. I know you need parking for that. There's no indication on any of the parking calculations about that there's a restaurant on the site and that we should be calculating the parking for restaurant use. There's no loading area provided. I don't want trucks to go from, because they can't go to a 24-hour gas station and a Tim Hortons that's open from 6 o'clock in the morning to 11 o'clock at night. There's no place to load. They're going to load at Cranbrook. I don't think that's a safe situation. We would like to see a decorative fence along the property line because there are doors that open up to our property line, and within 5 feet of our property line, there's a door, and I don't want people to go out that door and fall down that hill. And again, there's a lot of information on the elevations that aren't correct. There's, the scales are wrong, the pochane is wrong, the scales are wrong. It just needs to be cleaned up, and once we see what the real proposal is, then we can all see and enjoy, hopefully a new development. But until then, I don't think anybody can make that decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience who wishes to address the Planning Commission in regards to this petition? Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing and I will read the motion. The Ann Arbor City Planning Commission hereby recommends that the mayor and city council approve the Shell Gas Station Plan Unit Development PUD site plan and associated landscape modifications. Moved by Commissioner Mills, seconded by Commissioner Ackerman. Discussion, Commissioner Ackerman.
Here, I thought we were going to have an easy one. Mr. Chang or Mr. Lerner, can you please speak to the objections we just heard, specifically about the completeness of the application?
Well, I am going through right now, just trying to scroll through who was signed off. I can tell you that the traffic has signed off, but I do want to double check as far as were those numbers correct. So I'll continue that while we have discussion. You could put a fence up. That is entirely up to the petitioner, whether they want to put one up or the actual Cranbrook residents or owners would like to put a fence up. It is not a requirement. I believe there's a couple of slides that would show, I don't know if he's got the PowerPoint, that would show that the 12 spaces were included
Move
as a
it.
parking calculation.
Yeah.
It's also broken down on the zoning chart, again, may not be on this one, but there's a hyperlink that you could look to see. In fact, you can
Yeah.
just barely catch it, how they came up with their parking calculations, breaking it down, I think, by restaurant, office, and typical retail out there. So as far as meeting parking minimums, trying to go through what the other
We,
this was, if you remember the.
Yeah, I could probably help out a little bit.
We'll start looking up some information.
The initial PUD was all approved. We're adding on to, just to the south side of the area, so we just took that particular side. So the topographic and all the dimensional and everything else with the existing pumps and all the parking, were all in the previous application, already reviewed through engineering, already reviewed for planning, and already approved. So we took this as just the addition and put the addition on the other side. And after receiving through the citizen participation meeting some of the concerns, we came back and we did, as Chris just mentioned, we went back through, we calculated with a restaurant, and because previously it wasn't put on as a restaurant, it just had drive-through, and it just had the filling station and retail is how they did it previously. So we went back, we put the restaurant in at 680 feet and calculated the square, that required 4 spaces. And we still in excess of 3 spaces, or 4 spaces, of what the total required if we used both. So there wasn't really lack of information. The information was just targeted towards the area in concern where we were working.
Okay. And then, thank you. And then the dimensions of your drawing within the parking lot, do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, all the dimensions are correct, and they've all been reviewed through engineering and through staff. Through
Okay.
all of your staff, everybody has been through it several times, and everybody's very.
Did you submit a photometric plan?
The photometric plan, no, because it was an existing photometric, and we're not doing any additional, I shouldn't say that.
Yeah.
We are going to have some lighting on the additional building, but it was deemed negligible, so we didn't provide a new photometric plan.
Okay, so just so
There's
you
no
kn-
new light poles being added or anything of
That's
that nature.
That's really great to know.
Okay.
So just so you know, we're working as a city, 2 separate commissions, this commission being one of them, towards revising all of our lighting ordinances,
Yeah.
and we're trying to work towards dark sky policy.
Right.
Can you speak to whether or not your lights would be compliant with that? It would be great if we could get them there ahead of the.
I can't speak to
code.
the existing canopy as it sits now, because that was constructed, like I said, 97 or so. And I'm not sure if it was upgraded to LED. The owner is here. They did conform to that, where they went through and just renovated the canopy recently and installed LED lighting. And
So-
at that time, they would have had been in compliance with the city.
On the proposed 4,700 square feet, the lighting, where our concerns would be is like most of it revolves around shielding and orientation of the light.
Yeah.
Would you be willing to work with staff to make sure that you're shielding it appropriately in
yeah,
line with what we're
absolutely.
hoping to achieve as a city? Just the
Yeah.
PUD presents the opportunity
And
to do
downlight
that.
only.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly right.
That's typical of what we've
Okay.
been doing.
That'd be appreciated. And I'd look to staff to help with that. The fence.
The fence is in the back there, and right now there is, I went out and shot it. There's about a 1-on-4 gradient going off the back of the property into their thing. And it came up in our citizens' participation meeting, would we be willing to do the fence? As I put to the neighbor, is the applicant or the owner is very amenable to any reasonable request. So I thought, it's, as far as a 3-foot high fence or something small was, it was something that he would probably consider doing. I brought it back to him, then they sent us a fence that they want, that's 6 foot high and all there, and we didn't want it to be like a trash collector. in between the building and the fence, in an area where just people are, because we get a lot of cross-traffic and
Is the utility of the
people walking
3-foot
back
fence
and
just to
forth.
keep people from walking? Is the utility of the 3-foot fence, it's not blocking any views?
I
it's
thought it
just
would be there just to over state the issue
To
in
keep people
later
from
days, but
cutting through.
the owner of the property, there's a lot of cross-foot traffic between the two properties.
Yeah.
Where they come over to use the Tim Hortons and they eat, and vice versa. People are there parking and going into Whole Foods and grabbing their food and doing things like that. So the owner would rather not install a fence because he likes to encourage that type of traffic going back and forth, especially on big events at the stadium and stuff like that. There's, as you know, a lot of people all
Yeah.
packed into one area. But
Okay, so I'm hearing maybe amenable to a 3-foot fence,
Maybe
not
amenable,
amenable to a
yeah.
6-foot fence? All right,
Yes.
I'll leave it there for now
Yeah.
for me. Thank you.
Commissioner Briggs?
So on the fence topic, I definitely agree. I would definitely not like to see a fence there.
Right.
I understand the concerns of Cranbrook, don't share them. If people are going across those side, across, they want to trek down the hill, lovely, power to them. I think that's what we want to encourage. I'd love to see a little sidewalk there if we're going to encourage anything else.
Right.
But I understand the ADA issues around that. However, my bigger issue on this is understanding why this, I still don't understand, besides people's apparent love for Tim Horton, what the public benefit was around a PUD back in 2014 and how this increased proposal is provided.
Providing any more public benefit?
But if this had been,
But-
if this all had been put together
Yes.
at that time and the commission was considering this proposal as it exists today, can you help me better understand what that public benefit was seen then and how that might complement it or not?
So this was approved approximately 5 years ago as a PUD, and it was mostly a service station, and it is an entry point into the city. I don't have a pointer, but if you look at a couple areas on the site, right at the corner, thank you, you can see that there's a public meeting area for pedestrians. There's also another little public meeting area right around where the drive-through goes in. They're also required to actually use certain types of building material for this fuel station as part of the public benefit. That's off the top of my head. I'd have to go back and pull the supplemental regs.
And there's also a paver walk right here connecting to that
Correct.
public benefit
Internal.
there. Yeah.
Pedestrian connections, but those were, off the top of my head, what the public benefits were for the Shell station.
So would this existing sort of expansion and development, would that have been, I don't know what the zoning was previously, would this have been something that would have been permissible with, what?
Oh, the underlying zoning is a C3, which is a fringe-type commercial zoning that would allow, obviously, a service station, drive-through with special exception use, which it did come back in for. And it does follow, it actually allows for up to 150% of the floor area. By right, they're at 15%. So, but there's, it's unlikely, I think, they're going to be coming back for any type of expansion because they're limited by parking. I can't see how they could do any more additions because of the park. So this site is just about as built out as it's going to get.
Commissioner Gibrandal?
I'm having a hard time with the layout plan as well.
Okay.
And there's some things that I'm seeing here that I'm actually kind of surprised it got through staff review with some of this, because when I look at the proposed parking, and I'm zooming in on sort of E-Track it so I can read what's going on, and it's hard to, it's hard to follow some of this. It's not the cleanest graphics I've ever seen in terms of sort of clarity of how these things are put together.
Go ahead.
The aisle that you're supposed to drive down, when I lay out a parking lot, there's a, 18 to 20 foot aisle, or 20 to 22 foot aisle that goes down the middle of your parking lot. You have a bunch of parking spaces across from what looks like an elevated, it is, I looked in your grading plan, there's a curb
In the grading
across.
plan?
There's a, if you look at the layout plan, there, it looks like there's like a pavement sidewalk zone on the corner of the building that has like the overflow drain in it and things like that, that's a step up, okay?
The overflow drain is
Right.
feeding the bioretention.
That's fine, but I'm referring to that kind of polygon there that is a
Yeah.
curbed structure there. It looks
That's
like
a
a
curb.
sidewalk with, it had a top of curb, bottom curb elevation on the grading plan. That is protruding into your drive aisle by like several feet. So in other words, if I park in some of those spots opposite of that,
Okay.
and then other cars come in and park beside me, there's no way for me to be able to back out and not go up over the curb.
We
Because
have-
you need at least 20 feet
we
behind those
do.
spaces in
and
order to
on-
be able to let those spaces,
Sheet C3 indicates the dimension between it. It actually exceeds the lane width of the city requirement.
well, but look at what you've got on your layout plan. What I see is that you've got, your minimum dimension there is 15 feet.
No, it's 22 feet, 20 feet
What sheet
between
am,
parking.
what sheet should I be looking at? I'm looking at a site layout
C3.
plan. It's on C3. What I see,
20 foot between parking and,
that's 20
Parking.
feet, that's further down. Okay? So those people are fine.
okay, I see what you're saying.
There's 15 feet.
Excuse me, I forgot my glasses.
Yeah, I know, believe me. I need mine too, I get it.
And they printed on a small thing.
So, right.
That
So-
was maintaining 20 feet. I think probably what is going on, and why it did get through staff and stuff, is there's an easement running right along the property line there that is 12 feet or 13 feet wide that we've been playing a little havoc with because of the underground detention. It's sanitary sewer. So we can't really construct over the easement area. So that area in front of there was going from 15 to 10. And I assure you, that is 20 feet there for the bioretention. It's just, it kept moving from 10 to 15,
But
so,
this polygon of the sidewalk,
right,
how far is that from the back of?
20 feet,
20 feet from,
yes.
so this is wrong on what
That
I'm looking at?
dimension- That dimension on there must have been,
But
not there,
but
but
it's
it-
not lining up. You have 20-foot dimension further down, and this
Right.
thing is protruding into that dimension. So it's like, something's screwy here. Something's screwy here. Because either that sidewalk should line up with the aisle
it's,
that's
yeah,
going
it's
down the middle.
required, it's required to have 20 feet.
Right.
And the bioretention worked out to it. And,
So in other words, this sidewalk is shown incorrectly.
I think what what must have happened is just, what was it, 2 days ago, Chris? When you recommended switching to a small car?
Say again? Can
You went to a small car over there? You sent it over to
Well, I did
Caitlin?
when we were trying to get that.
To go to
pedestrian
that
path.
small car and move that for a walkway through
Yes.
there for pedestrian access?
We'd have to look at that to see if.
Yeah,
'cause
it
a regular spot
definitely is
9 by
required
18,
to
it's
be
small, it's
20
8 by
feet,
16.
and it was-
So we might be able to reduce some of the spaces to small car parking, which would widen the aisle, but I don't know if it's going to meet the 20.
That probably happened in our office when she moved it for the small cars, she moved over. But there was required 20 feet and the bioretention was approved. That
No, I'm
was
not,
just-
I'm not even thinking about the bioretention
Okay.
right now. I'm just thinking about the site layout on the top, and that right now, if I park in one of those spots,
You're absolutely
I
right.
wouldn't
and
be
it's
able to
gotta be
back up
20
and get
feet.
out.
It had to be 20 feet, and it was 20 feet. This change was just made 2 days ago, and I think it just came up because of the small car, and I think it was an error in my office.
okay.
So,
So-
but that is definitely required to be 20 feet.
Because
it
right
was
now,
20
it seems
when it
like it
got
would
through.
also be hard for, there's like when you first pull in, there's a landscape island, the
Yeah.
one that has a radius of 5 feet.
Yeah.
That protrudes out further. So what I'm trying to imagine is the dumpster truck being able to get down the middle of that thing, given if this thing is filled with cars, because that thing protrudes further out. Like, I don't know, they're just,
Yeah, the dumpster- the
there's things
dumpster-
going on here that feel like it needs to be
Yes.
I had a hard time reading these
I've s-
drawings, and I just feel like there's some things that need to be cleaned up. So
Okay.
I feel like it's hard to evaluate it if it's not like the way it's really supposed to be. That's how I feel about it. I actually
me,
respectfully disagree on the fence thing, because if that is a steep slope on the other side, then if they owned that steep slope, then it's their liability. And they're willing to take the risk to be able to let people go back and forth to Whole Foods and do their full shopping
Yeah.
experience with whatever that is. But it's not on their property. It's Cranbrook's liability if somebody falls down that thing. So I feel like there needs to be a fence there. As much as I want to encourage people to be able to move back and forth, I don't feel like we should, if it's their risk to take, then that's one thing, and they're willing to do that, but it's not their risk, it's somebody else's
The
liability
actual-
with that.
The actual slope in this particular area, and I see what she did, when she adjusted to the small car parking for the thing, she actually moved the curb, which she shouldn't have. So it went from 16 to 20, and that's why that's not 20 feet. Because in the original proposal, in the approved document that we had put forth before staff, the dumpster is in the center of the 20-foot lane, and the 20-foot lane lines up with that curb.
With that curb,
And I
okay.
think all she did is, in my office, I was out in the field quite a bit today, she was moving things around to make the small car park, so we had it there. And she moved that curb in 4 feet instead of
Okay.
the opposite to
So
make
I
it
guess
work.
I feel like I need to have this thing cleaned
So
up in
that-
order for me to
so that
evaluate it
20
well.
foot. But in the answer to your question as far as the liability, the slope over to the south side of the property is down to probably a 1-on-6 at the southern end. And right at the station end, it's like a 1-on-4, 1-on-5. If you go further to the north, it's like a 1-on-2.
Well, 1 on 2
And
is
Crabbrook's, and that's how it was, that's how it was constructed.
No, I get it, but
So
they
if
weren't
they're
ever
so
thinking there was going to
concerned, then
be.
they should be concerned about the present condition all the way down.
Right, but the issue is that they're not inviting people to come to their site. Your site may be inviting people to go to, like you're saying, we want to be able to encourage people to go back and forth, and that means the risk is on the
Well,
Cranbrook's
he says
property.
people do go back and forth now, and
Right,
it
but I think
happens, and
it's
there's a lot
entirely
of walking.
reasonable for Cranbrook to want a fence there so that they don't get sued because somebody slips down the slope and says, you didn't stop me from doing it.
Well, I mean, and I would concur if that is the truth, and we did talk about that in the citizens' participation, but if they're that concerned, then they should run it down the entire site too, because it's far more dangerous at the north end, and that's where most of the walking traffic is coming, is at the north end of the property, not at the south end. They don't usually walk over here, they walk over on the north end because they're coming into the Tim Hortons to
I
grab
guess all I would
coffees.
say is I support a fence being there, actually,
So-
because I don't think we should be encouraging people to use something that's a steeper slope, and that I think it protects Cranbrook's, very reasonable liability concerns, that we'd be encouraging people to go down a steeper area and to park on their property and use the Tim Hortons or whatever, so.
And I
Those are-
guess it would be the owner's position that if they feel like it is a liability to them, they should build a fence. And I mean, we don't have anything to say about whether we do it or not. That's entirely up to them, if they want one or not. You know what I mean? So,
I am with Commissioner Briggs on fence, being like, I don't think it ought to be there, in part because I think this new addition is not necessarily adding a new entrance to any retail on that side. People do use it. And honestly, if I were Cranbrook, I would be adding more access to the sidewalk throughout your site. That's the big problem. I most often move around that site on bicycle, and you have to go out of your way. And on a bicycle, it's faster than if you're a pedestrian, and we want to encourage walkability. And if you're in the Whole Foods parking lot, I mean, if you think of the clientele too of that shopping center, Whole Foods, REI, those are people who are more often than not gonna, they're more often than the average Joe to show up on a bicycle or show up on foot and want to get to the corner. And honestly, that corner right there is the one where there's crossing. So I don't support putting a fence up there because I've cut through there personally. And there are steep slopes that are too steep. And I think similar to Meyer on the other side of the highway, we should be taking down some of those berms rather than encouraging them. So, that's not the petition before us, but all I'm saying is I wouldn't put that, I would not support putting a fence there because I would hope that someday that fence wouldn't be needed because we would have more connectivity with Cranbrook and the road. I don't think that there's tons of parking. I haven't actually seen this corner as congested, and the people that arrive on cars aren't actually gonna go all the way around and then walk up that slope. It's the weird pedestrians like me, right, that are willing to do that. So I think in terms of the fence, I'm not in support of that. I do have questions about that traffic study. Mr. Chang, you had asked about, and some of the assumptions in terms of the square footage. So do we know what was used? And if not, I think I would like to.
believe I can answer that, I think.
Yeah.
The actual traffic study said 3 1,500 square foot units, and it was done by Spalding de Decker and reviewed by your traffic engineer and considered to be accurate.
Got it.
And then, so,
Did it include the restaurant uses, the drive-through uses that, because, yeah.
no, I think they took the impact as, is what the new addition was gonna, how it was gonna impact the existing. So that's how, that was the premise that she started on, and that's how she wrote up her traffic study, is how is this gonna impact this any further, any more trips to the site, and what uses are gonna be used possibly, and went down that road. So I don't know that she specifically, I know she didn't, specifically address just the restaurant. She took the restaurant as an existing use and looked at this, as we did through the whole project, as a proposed impact on the existing structure that was already approved and operating.
So your decision to do the parking calculations based on revising the
now-
initial parking calculations?
Now, calculations were different.
Okay.
Calculations were all, I took the old calculations and put them as used. We generated by infilling the pond per se, which is sitting like 10 foot away from the sidewalk right now, and it's a 6 foot deep hole there. So we're proposing enclosing that and then putting landscape on top along with parking in the area. And we created 21 spaces there, which was adequate for the new proposed addition, but we took away 8. They had 6 extras, so we're still in excess of the minimum. And
Yeah, I understand. I'm curious for
whole.
staff if it's customary, because of this site, right? Like, when you're opening it back up, bringing parking into compliance is something, and so making the parking according to what's actually there seems reasonable. What do we do about the traffic? Do we just require the traffic study for the addition or for the whole site?
I'm just observing the traffic study now where it's got, as far as the convenience market, it's saying that it's got existing 40, they use 4,080 and proposed 4,080, so it's around 8,000 square feet, which I believe is fairly close to what's being proposed, if I'm reading the chart correctly. As far as the conclusion then goes, it says the impact of the proposed expansion on adjacent roadways is not significant. The addition and realignment of parking stalls will improve on-site circulation, allow for easier access to all buildings on the site. I'm just going by what's in the staff report. I don't know, without probably double checking though with the traffic engineer to make sure that those numbers are actually aligning with what's being proposed to the exact number. I'm just giving you a brief summary of what I'm reading off from the traffic report.
Chris, I think it's a different question. Could you summarize how you measured the adequacy of parking on site?
Yes. We broke it down by the types of uses on there. I think in the chart, we broke it down by, it's 10 spaces for the restaurant use. It was X amount of spaces for the fueling station, then X amount of spaces for the proposed retail/office. Added them up, and they're proposing 39. I believe off the top of my head, required is 31. But those are off the top of my head calculations.
So to be
Yeah,
clear,
and-
we consider the site in total, all the existing uses and the proposed uses. And then if you look on the bottom right corner of the title sheet, that's where you'll get the summary of the traffic traffic generation, separate calculation than the parking. That's where you'll note that the petitioner provided trip generation analysis that compares what is there now versus how those peak hour trips would change based on the addition, and that's the summary for the traffic there. So in short, we do look at the totality of the site to make sure it's meeting the parking requirements, and from a traffic perspective, the traffic engineer is looking at how this is going to incrementally change as part of their evaluation.
Got it. And so one of the things that came out, sorry, I keep on mixing traffic and parking, but it's because, one, we said we're just going to treat existing as it is, and the other one, and just add to it for traffic, right? And the other one says we're going to redo the calculation for the whole site on parking. But for traffic, it looks at what's already there as existing, and then says, okay, what's this addition going to be on top of that, right?
Yes, and it also takes into account current trip volumes on the adjacent network. So and the traffic criteria have not changed substantially since this was reviewed. So in looking at that incremental change, they're still basing it on a very similar analysis protocol as was done before. That's why the incremental addition of current data and additional trips generated from the addition are appropriate.
Got it.
And then if I may even add, we did calculate it differently too. So we did put in the restaurant into it, and there was still more than adequate parking. It didn't change.
Thanks.
So we did it both ways.
The, one of the things that stuck out is that our multiplier for restaurant space is very different. It requires a whole lot more parking for restaurant square footage. So I'm not going to be the person to ask for more parking by any means, right? But the question is it reasonable to assume that this addition isn't going to become a restaurant? Like, that is going to be retail? It seems to me that shifted since 2013, that it wasn't initially anticipated as a restaurant, and now there is restaurant space that they have to account for in their parking. So I just want to make sure that we're clear on that.
Yeah, so you're required for a restaurant use 1 space per 1,000 square feet. And I believe on the chart, they've got 1,000 square foot Tim Hortons. If they were to convert the 4,000 square feet, it probably is not going to, that's going to require 40 parking spaces. They're out of compliance. So when it comes in for review for the building permits, it would be out of compliance. We would not approve a restaurant-type use. But what the petitioner has, I think, indicated, it's going to be maybe like a cell phone-type store, possibly some type of massage therapy, or those types of uses that would fall more in line with a regular type of retail use, not an intense restaurant use.
So the parking calculations, so those would be rerun effectively again when they do building permits for, even if there's an internal configuration and it's going from let's say it starts out as a cell phone store and then it turns into a restaurant in the future, when they go to pull those building permits, you're going to check the parking calculations again?
The zoning coordinator should. They should be looking at the supplemental regs and referring to what's allowed in the supplemental regs, but it may be a little murky because it allows for C1 type uses, which may be like a mom and pop type restaurant without any type of drive-through. But we would have to then state they're going to be well under what the parking requirement is, and it would not be allowed. So hopefully they're listening tonight that a restaurant use is not going to be approved as part of your building application.
More than likely, they're not going to want a competing restaurant in the same area.
Sure.
So.
Yeah, I would just tack on this. Your conversation is something that the code, I think, wrestles with. We have provisions for retail, we have provisions for restaurants, and we have provisions for retail centers, which are intended to accommodate some blend of those things. I can tell you we've also experienced a lot of development in the city that is evolving from a true, what I would say is more of a blend of retail and restaurant to primarily restaurant. When that happens, it tends to have more of a parking demand. So in this circumstance, calculating the parking based on the actual projected uses is probably a step in the right direction. But in short, we do attempt to provide that measure when an occupancy is proposed. In this case, we're not approving it as a generalized retail center with that flexibility, so we have more of ability to consider the parking requirements for the intended uses based on the calculations.
And just to close that loop, I'm okay with the number of parking spots, but I share Commissioner Gambrando's concern about I saw the same 15. So that needs to be clearly dealt with. But I'm not encouraging more parking here. I just want to understand how it all works.
Commissioner Sauvé.
So you took the words about retail center right out of my mouth. Because I did, the quick square footage calculation, and if it was a retail center, it all complies with 310 square feet per parking spot, which would only require 28, and could allow for a quick serve sandwich shop, another coffee shop, and, 3 more restaurants as retail. So actually, if it fell under that, it would be 28 spots and could be 3 more restaurants, where this actually requires more parking and not restaurants. So we're actually reinforcing lots of parking in this scenario, and as a fueling station, I guess it makes sense. So how many cars are kind of moving through here? So I guess that was kind of the second part of that conversation, when we tie in parking with traffic. Was this evaluated at all as a retail center, as load?
It was done, it states as trip generation rate per thousand, super convenience market, gas station.
Yeah,
I think they did it under
Yeah, they have that, and then
medical,
they
dental,
added,
and then electronics. So
right.
they may have looked at it in different types of scenarios.
Yeah, so that's where I see on the current one reviewed, medical, dental, office building for everything. And then 1,500 square feet, it's not noted what that third use is, actually.
Actually, that was storage for the gas station.
1,500 square feet?
The 13 or 790 square feet where the stairway comes out.
I'm looking at the traffic analysis. Super convenience market gas station, proposed 4,080 square feet.
Okay,
Medical, dental, office, 1,550 square feet. And then blank use, 1,550 square feet.
right.
Which looks like it's evaluated at a higher trip generation at 4.3 instead of 3.5. So I'm guessing that's business instead of medical office. It's just not noted
Not
in there.
knowing what's in there, I think she was trying to mix it up a little bit. to get
So yeah, those were kind of the conditions I was looking at, and just to kind of speak from experience, like, I feel comfortable with this as more parking than other ways you could calculate it. So in terms of those concerns, right, we could count this a few different ways actually based on use, and this gets you the most parking in an intersection that, yeah, is car-centric. I know that there could be walkable areas, but it's not geared towards that, so, yeah, that makes sense to me. The other question I actually had, you have rear service entries to all of the retail, but it doesn't show sidewalk or grading.
Yeah, we just made that modification as well earlier. We moved the building 1.5 feet, so it's 6 feet off, reducing the square footage actually. And where the rear entries showed on the building, we changed the front door on the southern unit to open towards Ann Arbor, or Eisenhower Road. So it opens towards the parking.
Okay.
Thinking that that'll keep that parking with that unit down there on that side. Because at the present moment, they're feeling they're going to lease the first 2 spaces to PT, I think it's physical.
Okay.
So in the rear, there will be a sidewalk that's going to need to go in for them to come out, enter in the rear of the building if necessary. But that's something that comes up during building because of the access points. We got no more than 75-foot travel distance, depending on occupant load
And
and some
that's
other
kind of, this is the thing
issues.
that, it's a pinch point in that back, putting up a fence, those door
Right.
swings with a sidewalk, and if you're exiting out of that and that door swings open and you're pinched between an open door and a fence, you actually
there's-
can't maneuver around to get past that blockage.
At this moment, we do have 6 feet there. So
Clearance
if the
before that
fence is on
property
the
line.
property line,
Okay.
there'll be,
You'd have
a couple
6 feet
feet
clearance
there,
and then
but-
6 feet door swing.
again,
Okay, that's something that I want to make sure is in this set of updated plans. before it moves on.
Yep, that's a good point. I did speak with the building department the other day regarding that comment. It does have enough space. What may also be, because of the grade in the back, they may have to put a railing up, so for a safety issue. Why they didn't want to go too far into actually putting something, a layout that's exact is, the building department stated, well, how do you know what's going in there? Until we know, are they going to use the whole space, half the space, divide it up into thirds?
Right.
That will determine how much egress is going to be required. At that point, it'll be caught at the building department, but there is enough space between the property line and the building, and there's probably going
that
to need to be
6
a
feet.
railing to
Yep.
be able to have a secondary means of egress to exit
Yep,
the building.
okay. Those were my two main ones. Thanks.
So to talk a little bit more about parking, so there are 39 spots proposed.
Correct.
12 are used for the gas pumps. 10 are for the drive-through. Is that correct? Am I understanding
No,
that
no,
correctly?
there's actually stacking on top of that. So there's stacking, that's not counted in the parking. So the drive-through has its own stacking. There's 9 spaces for the drive-through, I believe. That was approved back in 3 years ago.
Got it, okay. So, part of the reason why I'm talking about parking is because I use this gas station on a fairly regular basis,
Yeah.
and it is a giant mess there most days with parking and such. So I'm a little concerned. So outside of so if we can go back, or if you can take us to the proposed plan,
Sure.
and just, if you can walk me through exactly where all of the parking is on the site?
All the parking right now is,
Not where it is right now, where it will all be.
okay. These spaces are staying as is, the 5
Okay.
spaces over here for the Tim Hortons. There's presently 1 space here that's handicapped, and if you frequent the station, you'll notice there's another space right there that's being removed. And just because we didn't feel, I think it was actually put in wrong, at the very beginning when they constructed before. The stacking is over here. As far as Tim Hortons goes, 90% of their customers are going through the drive-through, and then they have people that just walk in, pick up, and leave. They don't have too many people sitting around, and again, if you frequent the station, you probably witness that. The owner uses that area for the most. And the parking at the pumps, the cars that are sitting there getting their fuel, they go in and get their retail items or their convenience store items, whatever, pop, whatever it might be. And then, so the proposed addition over here, this has been primarily, when you go in there and you see the people parking, that parking is pretty far away from the actual entrance to the station. And if I can go back to the existing, if you see this, you go past this area, there's an air pump in there, and they presently have, they have ice and they got propane out there at the moment, and the parking's over here. This parking is about 50% full most of the time, and most of that's probably employees of the gas station as far as that goes. So what we did was we infilled the pond area over here, and we created actually 21 new spaces. And these are primarily to take care of the new retail, whatever it might be. Right now, it looks like it might be 4,000 feet of, or 3,000 feet of just PT. But in the event that there's a 1,200 square foot user, retailer, I don't know, cell phone store or something along that line, we wanted to have the parking adequate just for them in the back, over on that side. So we attempted to keep the parking separate from the gas station use, and that's why we just kind of looked at it as the impact on the southern part of the site. So most of the area that is being impacted right now is not really in use, with the exception of them 4 or 5 spaces, or the 8 spaces that we're taking up, but about 4 or 5 of them are used.
Okay. So I tend to agree with Commissioner Gabrandel in regards to the fence. If there's no agreement between the two owners about having some sort of a shared sidewalk installed, which due to the grade chances are that that's probably not going to happen. I think there are aesthetically pleasing fences that can be put up. I'm not asking for a 6-foot fence, but even a 3-foot fence enough, because that
Yeah.
grade is pretty substantial. So I think that has to be part of this plan. The other question is in regards to loading and unloading. Where does that happen? So loading and unloading of deliveries, so merchandise.
Yeah, the loading zone technically is not a requirement under the PUD document.
Yep.
But what they usually do is, if you notice in there, the loading usually is done off hours. So like the gasoline, when it's filling the tanks, they come off hours because they don't want to block anybody and they don't want their customers blocked. So the same thing happens with the loading, unloading. So more than likely, they'll use the retail space where the parking is right there and just park in front and unload. Even now, if you're there quite a bit, you'll see the trucks park right out front, unloading, going through the front door, bringing in the pop or whatever else. And just as a convenience for the station, as an operational standard, they're not going to want to block their pumps and block off everybody and create more turmoil than they already have in their busy hours. So they usually have everything coming off hours. So that's usually how it did. We did look at actually plowing in over here. There's adequate space because we're way in excess of the landscaping, but as you know, since the station has been built, it's been a pillar. I mean, it's gorgeous coming into the city. It's very well kept, well maintained for the last 16 years. And the thought of plowing in and destroying some landscaping to put a loading zone out here that probably won't ever be used, it was kind of like a trade-off. So that's how we took it.
Mr. Chang, can you talk about signage with now adding potentially 3 additional businesses on there? You know, there's lots of signage on the site. How is that with new businesses? How is the signage going to change? What more signage will be allowed on the site? Especially with the large, price sign that's at the corner and then additional signage that's on the building.
Each new business is allowed 2 square feet of signage for each foot of building frontage. So we do the calculation so each new business is going to get its own amount of signage. So let's say each storefront's 20 feet wide, you're going to get 40 square feet of signage. I know we've kind of gone back and forth. I'm sure the petitioner, we've gone out there and done enforcement on taking down a lot of the signs that are out there. There's a little bit of creep. It does come back, and we'll just have to continue enforcing on temporary signage that may be out there, letting them know it's not allowed. It's kind of a give and take.
And in regards to the monument sign at the front?
You are permitted to have a monument sign separate from your overall amount of signage. So you can have, I think, up to 200 square feet of a monument sign.
Okay. Commissioner Ackerman?
On the fence issue, I might suggest we take a vote, since there are differences of opinion. Where would, based on conversation, what would your recommendations for dimensions or locations of that fence be?
I guess I probably wouldn't jump into that. I think your initial thought is probably helpful. I am hearing the same. It sounds, if I had to predict at this point, I'm thinking we're heading towards a postponement for some additional information and some clarifications on the drawings. I guess I would leave some of that design to the petitioner as it relates to the entryway doors leading to the back of their facility where the slopes are more severe and maybe less. But I think at a minimum, it would be helpful for the petitioner to have a sense from this planning commission if there should be a fence on there or not.
So how about this? I'm going to move a postponement with the direction that the dimensions be cleaned up, that also staff explore with the petitioner a fence. If you don't want a fence, you can vote down this motion to postpone, and then we can introduce a different motion to postpone that does not include exploring a fence. How does that sound?
So it's been moved, and can we get it seconded really quickly? Seconded by,
No, not quite a second yet. I just
Alright.
want to clarify one thing on
Alright.
the fence business and the walkway, and that is, those grades are really steep. There is no way they could ever put in a sidewalk and have it be compliant, ever. So if this were flat, I would be saying something different, but it's not. It would have to be steps, or it'd have to be super steep. And so that's just the reality that's out there, folks. So I just want to make sure that that's part of how people make their decision.
right. So postponement with the direction of fence to be installed. It's been moved, seconded by Commissioner Gabrandel. Discussion on that postponement motion?
Fence
Commissioner
debate.
with a fence? Commissioner Briggs?
I don't think this adds anything new, but I will say it anyway. I just don't think that we should be in the business of, we've got I'm not, this addition isn't going to actually necessarily probably significantly impact the change in pedestrian flow along there. What we already have is the ability for some people to cut through there, and some people are doing it, and I just don't know why we would possibly. I understand there's some liability issues and things like that. That's not my concern. My concern is connectivity through our community, and I think that's important. So I understand where you're coming from, but just.
Okay, any further discussion on postponement with a fence? A direction for a fence? Let's do a quick roll call vote.
Commissioner Milstein,
Yes.
Commissioner Mills. No. Commissioner Gabrandel. Commissioner Abrams,
No.
Commissioner Ackerman,
Yes.
Commissioner Briggs. Commissioner Hammerschmidt. Commissioner Sauve.
I'll remind,
That was a yes.
I would just remind folks to vote with your microphone on for CTN.
I hate you all so much. The motion fails. It does not receive a majority of the board. 4-4.
4-4. Great. Commissioner Ackerman?
By I hate you, I mean I love you.
I think either way is not workplace appropriate. I'd make a motion to postpone to fixed dimensions without conversation of offense.
Do we have a second? Seconded by Commissioner Mills. All those in favor, please say aye. Commissioner Briggs?
Is there discussion?
Sure, discussion?
I just want to say when this comes back, I appreciate there's a lot of discussions. I'll vote in favor of coming back with. When it comes back, I don't plan on voting in favor of this. I don't think if I saw this existing proposal with this, I don't think it meets my thought of what kind of our requirements for a PUD. And looking back at what was the justification for the PUD, I just think this is adding unnecessary sort of intensity at that corner where we're already having some challenges. So I'm not particularly in favor of this proposal, but I won't object to more information.
Can I ask a clarification question?
Sure.
Since it's already designated as a PUD, is public benefit something we're supposed to be considering, or?
No.
Can you clarify? Maybe I need more information. Maybe I need to be reconsidering what I will be voting for.
The no rezoning is being proposed at this time. To consider a planned unit development, there is a public benefit discussion. The city has rezoned this property to planned unit development. It has now established a zoning district on which they are submitting a site plan for consideration under that zoning district. So your review of this would be, is this site plan compliant with those zoning regulations? I don't believe it is. It's not questioning the zoning. That zoning has been enacted.
Okay, and I guess all right.
Maybe also, is it possible between now and the next time we discuss this for staff to confirm that the inaccuracies and omissions which were brought up during the public comment have been resolved?
Yep. And I'd also add, just work with them on dark skies for additional lighting.
And
Commissioner Sauvé?
Even though this is without the fence, I would say bringing more information and conversation with your neighbor about the fence so that we can have that dialogue again, if not in the plans, I think would still be welcome to this commission. So, at least on my end. I would be interested in seeing
I mean,
even the
I
grading
mean,
plan
believe me,
beyond
we
the
have
property to
convers-
really understand.
We have conversations. I'm all
those
about
points.
working with
Yep.
neighbors, and as Chris knows, we spent 6
Yep.
years on the Circle K down the road. And so we take people's concerns very seriously, but in this case, there was just a lot of reviewing going on and questioning and trying to block the actual project, so it's getting a little different. It's
Yep.
not like people are trying to work together, it's like
And that's, I think,
it's a little more difficult.
for where this motion stands, it's not a request, this is my understanding, to include the fence in the plans the next time we review it as part of the postponement, but as part of the discussion the next time around, I would be interested in still seeing conditions to be able to evaluate it further.
Sure.
Further discussion? Commissioner Gabrandel?
one other thing, for putting it in the hopper for next time, is some of the landscape material is not going to hold up well in terms of the, just how difficult it is to live along Eisenhower, and so your Taxus baccata in particular is going to die in a year. It just needs a small courtyard. It's Zone 5. It's really more like a Zone 6 plant. It's never going to handle the exposure and the salt and all that sort of thing. So look more carefully at your landscape buffer that you're squeezing in 10 feet, so we'd
Okay.
really like it to live. So I would like you to work with whoever does your planting design to come up with some more robust species so that enforcement's hard, for the city. To be able to go out there and say this many died, it's just hard. And so we'd like you to use species that are really going to make it the first time around. So there are some questionable things in there, I just
And
thought, so.
the site itself is not, is more conducive to a wider green belt, because typically your sidewalk's a foot off your property line. In this case, it's 10 feet. So it's really 20 foot from the back of the curb to that. So we intend, and we got the approval to kind of blend out that into the right-of-way and guide that all in.
Yeah,
So
and-
it wasn't like we were squeezing, and
Right.
we put a wall there, and there happened to be a easement from years and years ago going through there, so you can't have a foundation inside an easement under it. over a
I get
storm
all
surge.
that, that's fine, I understand, from
Okay.
reading the staff report. I just
But
think some of the
definitely I'll
species
look at
need to
them,
be more
yeah.
robust in terms of the location that you have, so.
Sure, absolutely.
Further discussion on postponement? All those in favor of postponement, please say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? It is postponed. Those members of the audience who wish to be notified when this comes back for a hearing again, please make sure to fill out a card and place it in the little box right there. And we are going to take a 7-minute recess. We are back. All right, the next item on our agenda is 10B, which is the Glen Plan Unit Development PUD modifications for City Council approval. We'll begin with a 10-minute petitioner presentation. We'll move on to a staff report, then audience participation, and then discussion.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Craig Singer, the developer of the Glen Hotel. I'm here tonight with my partners Larry Deitch and Fred Goldberg. We've got our engineer Rob Wagner from Midwestern, and our architects Emil Sadeo and Patrick Berry with Newman Smith. We are here tonight to present our request for modifications to the Glen mixed-use PUD. We made this request a little over a year after receiving our PUD approval, after commencing with our architectural construction plans and reviewing all of our schematic plans with our branding partner. We have decided to and have been accepted by Marriott into their Autograph collection of hotels. Marriott describes Autograph as follows. They say, "We handpick and celebrate the world's most unique boutique hotels. Each one is chosen for its founder's passion, the thoughtfulness of its design, its inherent craft, and its connection with locale. Our aim is to showcase some of the most beautifully orchestrated hotel experiences in the world has to offer." We are very excited to have been accepted into this hotel collection. It affords us with the use of the Marriott reservation system while maintaining the independence of an individual boutique hotel, which we think should be unique and special for Ann Arbor. Some of our proposed modifications are the result of proposed improvements by the developer and Marriott, and some are the result of engineering limitations in the construction plan process. A brief description of our proposed changes are as follows. The first is to revise the pedestrian entrance on Glen Avenue. We aren't adjusting or changing at all the vehicular entrance to the building, but we are making some slight modifications to the pedestrian access off of the sidewalk in front of the building by we're actually eliminating one of the entrances to the hotel and tucking it into the porte cochere to eliminate some of the pedestrian traffic concerns and makes, we think, improvements into the lobby and traffic experience. We are reducing the number of lower-level valet double parked spaces, as a result, we're going to be reducing the number of total parking spaces in the building from 252 to 241, but we still maintain or exceed the 235 required minimum under the city ordinance. The building, after it's engineered, shrunk in width a little bit, or our available space shrunk in width because the walls got wider, so we lose a few parking spaces. We're making a revision to the rear elevation of the building to accommodate the relocation of the northern stairwell and the window configuration to accommodate some slight floor plan changes. We aren't increasing or reducing the number of rooms or number of windows, but you'll see, or you've seen in the presentation, some minor elevation changes on the back of the building. We're removing the PTAC units in the hotel rooms, which are the through-wall AC units that were approved on the building and are just deemed not appropriate for high-quality hotel rooms such as the Glen. We will be changing that to a centralized HVAC system, which I think from an exterior standpoint, it just eliminates all of the vents in the rooms and it replaces them with glass. So I think it's a big improvement. And lastly, the building height. We are modifying the building elevations to provide the building remaining 9 stories plus a screening wall. We are requesting this increase in order to accommodate the added ductwork needed when eliminating the through-wall HVAC, as well as needed additional ceiling height in the banquet and restaurant and lobby spaces. We've accommodated these changes by bringing down some of the elements at the top of the building to make the height modifications, we hope, look like that they're not really noticeable. And I can point those out in the plans as well. Would you like me to go through, Jill, or do you want to go through
Nope.
the?
Go ahead.
Okay. So this is the new front elevation of the building, and there, on top of the roof, there's two main changes to the top of the building here. Where you see the round window on the front elevation, that now has been brought down. It used to exceed, that was the tallest part of the structure. We sort of flattened that out, and we eliminated the penthouse on the roof of the building. So in terms of the appearance of the building, when you compare it to the old front elevation, that's the old front elevation, you can see how that center portion extends up, as well as there's above the glass on the tallest portion of the building, there's a penthouse which no longer exists. That's the revised. This is the old back of the building, and you can see that that round window on top in the middle of the back of the building is in that penthouse. And then we reduced the size that brought it down into the height. So we were able to essentially get more height on the first two floors without the building appearing taller, because we lowered the roof elevation. And then here you can see if you look at the first two floors, the difference in terms of the elevation of the height. And those are really the major exterior changes. In terms of the street view, it was simply eliminating the pedestrian entrance that was right under the entrance to the building, the signage to the building on Glen Avenue, and tucking it under to the porte cochere where the car drop-off area would be. You can actually, on the rear elevation, you can also, it's easier to see the PTAC units, which are on the bottom of the glass on every single room. And here they aren't there. And here they are there. You'd have to look carefully at the glass configuration, but it's pretty noticeable. In person, it would be much more noticeable. So that is our proposal. We are here to answer any questions, and appreciate your consideration.
Thank you very much. We will now head over and welcome Ms. Thatcher for a staff report.
Just a few things to add on this petition. The overall height of the building increased by 6 feet, but it's still below the 109 feet 4-inch maximum allowed by the PUD that's in place right now. So that overall height limit doesn't have to change in the supplemental regulations were this to be approved. The mix of bike parking spaces has changed from 18 Class A and 16 Class B to 14A and 20B. 4 spaces that were in the parking structure were shifted up along East Ann Street. I think that this is actually a positive because they'll probably be better utilized there. And 14 is still a considerable number of Class A spaces that are inside. Really, that's about all that I have to add. Staff does believe that these are minor and appropriate modifications, and that it meets the spirit and intent of the existing PUD and the city's ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to open up a public hearing. Anybody in the audience may address the Planning Commission for up to 3 minutes. Please step up to the podium, state your name and address for the record.
Hi, I'm Chris Crockett. I just want to say that Craig and Larry and their team have kept us informed. They had a meeting, when was it? Well, it was in the spring, the night that there was a big tornado warning, and the meeting was broken up because we all had to take shelter in the cellar of the league. But we think that these are good improvements. They've kept us in the loop, and our concern has always been about pedestrian safety. That's one of our concerns, and about any kind of dangers that might be posed by increased automobile traffic. We feel these things have been addressed, and we can see this project going forward, although I warned them that at the same time that this project is about to be built, the university is planning just a block away to build the School of Pharmacy and also do changes and improvements and enlargement on the power plant, all near Glen and Huron. So good luck.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience who wishes to address the Planning Commission? Seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing and I will read the motion. The Ann Arbor City Planning Commission hereby recommends that the mayor and city council approve modifications to the Glen Mixed-Use Plan Unit Development PUD zoning district, supplemental regulations, and PUD site plan with the condition that the 5 lots are combined before issuance of any permits. Do I have a commissioner that'll move? Moved by Commissioner Mills, seconded by Commissioner Sauvé. Commissioner Ackerman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Excited to talk about this one again. I think it's one of those projects that gets Planning Commission, City Council excited about, positive development, and with developers who engage neighbors and plan something to put in something truly of need to the surrounding area. I think this is an area of town that still needs hotel, still needs event space, and I'd rather the hospital be served by a hotel next door than up the Plymouth corridor. I think these changes are modest in their nature, all well within or very close to the bounds that we set now almost a year ago. Maybe more now even. Wow, time's flying. And then just as a reminder, in addition to the benefits of the mixed-use project itself, accompanying it also comes $500,000 contribution to affordable housing, $15,000 to our Parks Fund, as well as cleaning up 4 stories worth of contamination below the site with no tax abatements. So I think these are small and modest changes to allow something that'll be a community asset.
Commissioner Mills.
I agree that the benefits of this when we saw it first were fantastic, and that the changes are modest. And I would say the one sticking point that I had the first time was that door on Glen. And so I think that's fantastic. Great. I'm glad that it fits with the hotel that's taking over there anyway. Because I think it's going to be safer for pedestrians, and it's not going to put out and cyclists, and it's not going to put out the people who might arrive on foot. So just to come around the corner. Thank you. And I also fully support the idea of moving the Class B parking up. I think you're absolutely right that it will be utilized much more if it's at the street level. So thanks. I'm excited to see this go forward.
Commissioner Briggs.
Yeah, I have no concerns. I just wanted to say thank you. When I read the citizen participation report and saw how many individual meetings had occurred, it's really evident, the communication that's been happening, and it's wonderful to see. So thank you.
Commissioner Hammerschmidt.
Again, was not here for the first discussion of this project. I do think it looks great. Just for clarification, are these changes proposed because of the new partnership with Marriott? I might have missed that.
Some of them, Marriott carefully reviews the plans, so some of the suggested changes were the result of some other changes or things that we did, and some came from their reviews, some came from our own reviews, and as we were making changes, we sort of incorporated ideas like yours and things that we thought made improvements overall. So, and then some of the things really just came out of engineering, you know, in terms of figuring out where actual place, you know, things go in the building and that displaces other things. I'd like to take credit for the bike changes as being, you know, thoughtful, but they were probably less thoughtful and more the result of something occupying the space that where they came from. So we got lucky that it was better.
Thank you.
Sure.
Commissioner Gibrandal.
I also am fully in favor of this, and one of the things that I think works particularly well is not only is the pedestrian entrance oriented towards Ann, but the part of Glen that it does outlet onto is way wider. It's like the widest part of Glen, and that was our big issue. Was it's the only place for the bikes. There's only so much room on Glen. You really can't ride your bike up that street because it's so narrow, and so I just think the way that you end up resolving all of this works way more elegantly, and I'm just grateful that you all, that it worked out this way, and I fully support it, so.
So I'll just add my quick 2 cents. I was supportive of this project previously, and I'm even more so supportive today of it. For the past 2 years, every time I give a tour to an incoming resident to this community, I drive them by there and I tell them how great it's going to be, and I'm finally happy that it's actually all going to happen. So thank you for all the work that the petitioner has done on this. Without any further comments, I will go on to a vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's approved. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to.
Can we, so,
Hit F5.
I'm sorry, what, I don't know. Okay, now how do I run through our slides?
You're going to have to put yours.
No, I mean, you don't have, so you don't have any of like our plans or anything on here?
No, I don't have any.
Oh, all right. Okay.
All right, moving on to the next item on our agenda, and that is 2793 Plymouth Road Special Exemption Use and Site Plan for City Planning Commission approval. And we'll begin with the petitioner presentation.
Good evening, or should I say good night? My name is Jack Edelstein. I'm one of the owners of the Plymouth Road Plaza Building, also known as 2793 Plymouth Road. And we're here this evening to respectfully submit a petition to amend the existing special exception use permit for the Medical Marijuana Provisioning Center to increase it from currently permissible 550 square feet to 2,725 square feet. It's a little bit less than what the document says. The current tenant operating the provisioning center has been there for about 18 months, operating out of a tiny 220 square foot suite. We wanted to start out small because we didn't know much about this industry or the business. We didn't know how it would affect our building, other tenants, clients, so we thought we'd give it a try on a small scale and see if it worked. Then we could expand when another space became available. Well, things have gone, in general, fairly well. We did learn a few lessons along the way. One of the things that we did not know when we brought in this tenant is that in addition to their actual store where the sales are made of the medical marijuana products, there was a requirement for a waiting area for the patients. which was not available in that tiny 220 square foot space. Therefore, the existing common lobby became the waiting area for the patients, which worked sometimes, but oftentimes during overflow hours, it didn't work very well, and there were people actually almost pouring down out to the stairs. The other issue that we knew might come up, but didn't know exactly how it would affect us, was the odor issue, which was not a big deal, but occasionally it did come up. And so hence our desire to move it to the other end of the building, to a much larger suite, 2,700 square feet, that would have plenty of space for the lobby, waiting area, the separate store, everything that's required by the state for the licensing. Also, that suite, as opposed to the current suite, is separate. The HVAC system is separated from the common areas. In other words, the HVAC system that currently serves the 220 square foot store also serves the lobby and the hallway. So it was impossible to separate the odors. With this new suite, it'll have its own dedicated HVAC system. We brought a video. But I guess it's not working.
Yeah, this is.
Maybe we just look at the PDFs then.
This is a snapshot.
So we've got a few slides just to present the appearance, the look and feel of the place. We're planning to invest quite a bit of into the build out to have this high quality location. This is the hallway looking into the door, entry door down the hall. This is inside the space with the counter, the reception counter and the waiting area. That's the glass wall that's separating the waiting lobby to the medical store on the other side of the glass. Again, here's the lobby. We plan to have laptops available for patients to look at information while they're waiting in the lobby. This is inside the store, the retail area. There will be counters for display purposes and for sales. So that's pretty much it for our presentation.
Thank you. We'll now head over to Ms. Thatcher for a staff report.
Thank you. Just like to add that there are no changes to the existing approved site plan. So really, this is just an expansion of an interior space. The parking that's existing for this building still meets the parking requirements, even with this new expanded use. And staff does recommend approval of the special exception use and site plan. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to open up the public hearing. If there's anybody in the audience who wishes to address the Planning Commission, now is your time to step up to the podium, state your name for the record and your address, and address the Planning Commission for up to 3 minutes. Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing, and I will read the very long motion that's before us this evening. The Ann Arbor City Planning Commission, after hearing all interested persons and reviewing all relevant information, including an accompanying site plan, finds the petition substantially meets the standards in Chapter 55 zoning ordinance, Section 5:104, special exemptions, and Section 5:50.1, regulations concerning medical use of marijuana, and therefore approves the 2793 Plymouth special exemption use for a medical marijuana provisioning center. The approval is based on the following findings. 1, the proposed use will be consistent with the C3 Fringe Commercial District, which provides for commercial activities including retail establishments, offices, and personal services. 2, the proposed use will not adversely impact pedestrians, bicyclists, circulation, or road intersection based on the location. Plymouth Road provides access to the site, and the proposed use is consistent with other surrounding use traffic impact. 3, There's an existing site plan approved by City Council in 2013 on file in Planning Services. 4, through documentation submitted by the petitioner regarding waste disposal, inventory tracking, security, and other methods of operation of the facility, the provisioning center will be operated in a manner that will not have an adverse impact on the neighboring properties or area and will not have detrimental impact on natural features. 5, there's an existing approved special exemption use for medical marijuana provisioning approved for medical marijuana provisioning center approved in 2018 on file in Planning Services that will be amended by this special exemption use. The special exemption use approval is based on the following conditions. 1, the petitioner obtaining and maintaining both a State of Michigan medical marijuana license and a City of Ann Arbor medical marijuana permit, and providing documentations to Planning Services within 3 years of the City Planning Commission approval date of this petition. 2, the petitioner operating a medical marijuana business at this address within 3 years of City Planning Commission approval date of this petition. 3, the special exemption use may occupy no more than 2,725 square feet of the entire building. 4, the special exemption use supersedes the previous special exemption use approved on the site dated May 5th, 2018, and that the Ann Arbor Planning Commission approves the attached site plan which demonstrates compliance with the applicable special exemption use standards and no physical development of the property is proposed. Do you have a commissioner that will move that? Commissioner Mills, seconded by Commissioner Gibrandal. Do we have discussion? Commissioner Gibrandal.
Perhaps staff can answer this. Is the site plan kind of recent enough that there is reasonable bike parking that's already there? I know with many of these petitions, we've added that in. It seems like it's pretty recent. Did it comply? Like, is it kind of generally up to snuff in terms of how we think about bike parking now, too?
Yes, it meets
Okay.
current standards. Yeah.
Okay, all righty, thank you.
Commissioner Mills.
Do we know if when this came before us, we put a limitation on hours, or if we talked about hours?
Last time, there was no limitation on hours.
Okay. I just wanted to see if that needed to be carried forward because it's in a commercial area with varying hours. I don't necessarily see a need, but I just wanted to verify.
And I think that this was one of the earlier ones, and we had a discussion about that, and we decided based on it being nowhere near residential, that we were just gonna leave it open. But I did see somewhere in their documentation, it's, I think, 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. Monday through Friday, Saturday 10 to 9, Sunday 10 to 6. So they've pretty much flowed the hours that we've seen in the past. Any other discussion? All right, all those in favor?
Hang on.
Commissioner Gibrandal.
I would just for our own edification, if you could please come up and tell us about what the odor issue is, because I've read about this, but nobody ever really talks about it in the real. And so it'd be really helpful for us to kind of understand as a commission what's going on in terms of how stinky does it get? Like, what is it like? You know, we don't know much, so I'd just be curious to know what we're passing these days in terms of what these facilities are like.
Okay, I'll answer that. Before, I was remiss in not introducing our architect, Fadi Shikas, who produced these drawings. The odor issue, where it comes from is a good question. In the old days, before, a year ago, before the
Yeah, right.
emergency rules and changing rules, vendors were allowed to bring the product, the flower we call it, into the store and open it up and show it, but that is no longer possible. There are very much stricter packaging guidelines today than there were even a year ago. Nevertheless, you know, the flower does smell. If somebody opens a package inadvertently, then it's possible for it to leak out. I'll tell you that we were very sensitive because that location, the current store is right over our biggest tenant, the DFCU Financial. And
Bad combination, huh?
during the first 6 months, I think there were about 3 complaints, and we each time tweaked the HVAC system, and there have not been complaints in the past year. So I think it's been under control. But it is still nice now that we have that extra protection of not having that suite system flow into any of the other spaces of the building. So we don't expect that it will be a problem. If I can just make a point, though, to the petition that you read, Mr. Milstein, I didn't hear a specific increment, maybe I missed it, increase in the size that we're asking for from the 550 to the 1,000.
The special exemption use may occupy no more than 2,725
Sorry,
square
I
feet
missed-
of the
I missed
entire
that.
building.
Thank you.
And it further, it supersedes the approval from May 5th, 2018.
Okay.
Further discussion? All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? It's approved. Moving on to election of officers.
It's that most wonderful time of the planning commission year when you are going to pick your leadership. The officers for the planning commission, as specified in the bylaws, are the chair, the vice chair, and the secretary. Those positions are currently occupied by Alex as chair, Sarah Mills as vice chair, and Shannon Gibrandel as secretary. They are eligible to serve up to one more year, as the bylaws provide that individuals can serve in those office positions for up to a 2-year period. And this would be an appropriate time for a motion to be made to re-up them for another year, or if you deem somebody else appropriate for those positions, they can be nominated and voted on independently.
Commissioner Sauvé.
I make a motion to nominate the existing slate.
Do we have a second? Commissioner Briggs. Any other nominations?
I've got the secret ballots ready if you want to.
Seeing no other nominations, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? It's approved. Thank you.
It's too late now.
Annual review of city planning commission bylaws. At this meeting, we also once a year review our bylaws, and they were provided in our packet. I will take a motion to approve the 2019-2020 bylaws of the Ann Arbor City Planning Commission, moved by Commissioner Ackerman, seconded by Commissioner Briggs, and we have discussion. Commissioner Ackerman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We changed the format of developer presentations, then staff report, and then public hearing, and then discussion. I didn't see that captured in our bylaws, and I'm wondering if they need to be amended. For example, in the public hearing portion, there are rules about speakers that pertain to the petitioner. For example, the first petitioner gets 5 minutes, following representatives get 3. Given that they now have a bulk of 10 at the beginning, does that need to change? Do we need to codify the new format in the bylaws, et cetera?
I think we should. I think you'll recall we started that, I think, on somewhat of a trial basis to see how it resonated.
I like it a lot.
And if the commission thinks it's working, I think that's an excellent point. We should reflect this. Another proposed change that I was considering, but I hadn't proposed, if we are going to make some other edits, I guess I'll throw it in there to see if it's something you'd like to see articulated maybe in a future meeting for consideration, is the notion of requiring an affirmative vote of six commissioners to advance a petition. One of the things I would like to potentially clarify is that doesn't apply to a postponement. Sometimes we find ourselves that we don't have a quorum. We can have a quorum of 5 to hold the meeting, but not enough people to conduct business. One of the changes not proposing a change that it would reduce the number to advance action or a determination on a petition, but that sort of a more procedural scheduling thing could be done on a simple majority. So if that seems agreeable, maybe I'll propose that change in addition to updating the public hearing section to reflect our current approach as well. Does that seem reasonable?
Commissioner Mills.
Another change that I noted is on page 10. It's Article 10, Section 4. We've recently been having, sometimes allowing for the public comment to happen at working sessions or like ORC meetings early on, so that we know what people are there for. As I read this, that doesn't say that we can't do that, but that we would have to still offer, that we would have to still provide it at the end. I think it would be helpful for us to discuss that, or if we're okay with it at the beginning. Just because we have been experimenting again with that one, I think it would be good to get some feedback on where we want to go.
So my only thoughts on that is that since there's no action being taken at work sessions, is that what you're referring to as sort of work sessions in ORC having?
Yeah, it's work sessions in ORC, and so sometimes, especially when the room's full, it's helpful to know what they're there for.
Right. My only concern is speaking at the beginning and the end, and then it takes away, we only have 2 hours.
Right.
So it's making sure that we have enough time allotted. And I think instead of putting this in here, it's a case-by-case basis, just depending on if we walk into a room and it's full, then we can, at that point, one of the commissioners can move that we move public audience participation higher on the agenda versus it being at the end.
As right now, we shouldn't be doing that, since it's the shall be provided immediately
Yeah, I get,
after.
one of the things I'm thinking about as you're having this discussion is maybe that should be generalized just to clarify that audience participation shall be incorporated into working sessions and committee meetings. Perhaps we can draft it in some way that just makes it clear that it is the responsibility of those committees to make sure that that occurs, but it doesn't specify when, so that it provides that flexibility for the committees or working session to determine if it's to happen at the beginning, the end, or potentially both. But it would set the expectation requirement that it has to occur during those meetings, but it wouldn't be so prescriptive in when it happens in the context of that.
Commissioner Ackerman.
Small note on that, just, I imagine this goes through the city attorney's office, just making sure that's in compliance with the OMA. Thanks.
Commissioner Briggs.
And I guess I've really appreciated that we've been offering the audience participation at the beginning, and I think it's great that we've had a beginning and end. I would perhaps encourage us to always have it at the beginning, and then potentially, if we have time to have it at the end as well, that's great. But I don't see any benefit of having audience participation simply at the end of a meeting. That's not why people are there. I mean, it is, I've never seen it actually in our working sessions or in our ORC jeopardize our time. If anything, we can talk less and listen more, I think, sometimes. So I would be certainly in favor of encouraging that to always happen at the beginning.
Commissioner Gibrandal.
Though I can think of a couple of regulars that show up that I think are just curious and that often comment on our discussion in very thoughtful ways. And I think they're just, they just come because they're interested. And I don't think that they would necessarily have much to say at the beginning. And so, anyway, I just throw that out there because I think you know who I'm talking about, and it's always really valued in terms of hearing what they have to say in terms of our discussion. So I wouldn't quite see it in such black and white terms in those ways, because I think some people are there for a cause, and they are going to show up for just that meeting, and then there's some people that are just very invested in understanding what's going on with our business and have a lot of thoughtful comments that make sense after the discussion too. So,
Commissioner Briggs.
I completely agree with what you're saying, and I think the flexibility, I think this commission has been really receptive to public participation. I think we're really open to it. The only reason I am bringing it up more is that I have been an outsider at other meetings where you're the first time in, and you just don't realize that you can even ask to change the rules. And so I think to first-time participants and to people who are coming from out of town, it's just really nice to know that it's when you can speak, and hopefully, you know, that's beginning and end works really well. So I don't really care exactly how, I guess, it's fine if we don't make changes to this. My point really is more just for the agendas. If the agendas could reflect public participation, I think that would be great.
And maybe potentially that they can occur at the chair's discretion at what time of the meeting as well, or multiple times during the
Sure,
meeting.
yeah.
Just because if there are all of a sudden 10 people in the room, we may want to hear up front versus waiting till later. So, so do we want to postpone?
Yes, we do.
Alright. Do I have a motion to postpone? Commissioner Mills, seconded by Commissioner Briggs. All those in favor of postponement, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? They are postponed. We are now on to audience participation. This is the time for anybody in the audience to address the Planning Commission in regards to any items. If there's anybody in the audience, please step up to the podium, state your name for the record, and you may address the Planning Commission for up to 3 minutes. Seeing nobody, I will close the audience participation, and I will move on to Commission proposed business. Is there any Commission proposed business? Is there any Commission proposed business? Commissioner Mills?
There were a number of things that were both in the letters tonight and that were brought up around this table that we don't need to solve tonight, but that maybe we can put on our long list of things to deal with in work session or on our potential future work plans. I thought that there were a couple interesting things about affordable housing and what different, in the letters that came through, about what policy levers we might be able to use that I'd like to. Some of them were really long, and I didn't have a chance to dig all the way through them. And so I would like, this is something that comes up before us a lot. I think that it would be helpful to just ping that we got a couple good letters about that this time. There was a lot of interest in, or a couple letters about Airbnb that I know has been sort of on and off our work plan list. And I think I don't know what prompted these. So getting a little bit more, do you have more detail on that?
Well, I can just tell you, City Council has directed staff and you to make some recommendations. So right now it's in the staff side of that. We are starting to figure out how we're going to approach it. I think I can tell you from my experience, the one thing I've heard more and more is that there's a perceived issue. I don't have a sense of what our community goals is around it. And so that's one challenge. The second challenge is it's a pretty, right now we are looking in this, I guess philosophically as these are uses that are pertinent to a rental house or an owner-occupied house, and we regulate those in very specific ways. This would, for example, might be the first time that we start really regulating owner-occupied homes in a very significantly more detailed, invasive way than we have in the past. So we're starting to do some research on that. Ultimately, I think we're going to be sort of putting together what our kind of engagement plan is to sort of answer some of those questions about what, as a community, are the challenges and what are we trying to accomplish by doing something about Airbnbs. And so ultimately, that will come through this board.
Was there a time limit that the city council put on that, just so we've got some sense of when it's coming?
There usually is, I want to say late summer or the fall, but I can follow up with more detail
soon
about that resolution.
that we'll
Yeah,
be talking
this year,
about it.
yeah.
Okay. I have two more, because we talked about a lot of things came up. One of the things that Commissioner Briggs brought up was about requiring sidewalks, like if within private developments that is an expectation on both sides of the road, and if we can just verify that, especially if it's a private road in this case. And the other one is more of a point of clarification. I think processing it after the discussion. If a petition came before us for R1E today, would they be able to build a building? Would the basement count towards their 2,000 square feet?
Yes.
Okay, so if the first floor and the second floor were the same footprint and they wanted a full basement, then we're talking 650, right? 1,300 square feet and then the 650 square foot basement. Okay.
Yep.
I'm totally fine with that. But if other people aren't, then we should probably discuss that.
And we should probably discuss that because I don't know how feasible it is for somebody, for a builder today, to build a 1,300 square foot house, and make it so that, based on our land costs in the city, and make that work for them. So, I would put it low on our to-do list. And then just to add a comment in regards to Airbnbs, there is currently, I believe there's a bill in the Michigan Senate and there's a bill in the Michigan House of Representatives that the goal, I believe, for both of those bills is to be on the governor's desk at the end of this session that have to do with Airbnbs.
Yeah, those bills, I haven't followed them as much this year. Last year, similar bills were proposed, and they would prohibit communities from enacting regulations to regulate them.
And from what Michigan Association of Realtors is saying, it's looking good this year. But they said the same thing last year, so we'll see. What do you mean by that? It looks like
The realtors would like it adopted.
correct. The realtors would like it adopted, but it's looking good from that there's support there's bipartisan support in the House and the Senate, and also with the governor. That's to not regulate. So there are municipalities, for example, I believe I was reading about Ludington. Ludington does not allow any leases, any short-term leases. And that, and then you have communities nearby that do allow short-term leases, and it's a study on property values. That was the report that I was reading. How property values in Ludington versus another city that's nearby, I don't remember the exact city, how that impacts property values and home ownership rights.
Well, I'm glad that stripping local control is a bipartisan issue.
Yeah. Tough crowd. Oh, boy. All right, Commissioner Briggs.
Since we were making the laundry list, I think this is on there, but since we always are talking about which trees are getting protected, I don't know if there has been discussion in the past about, elevating, in terms of natural features protection, which trees are sort of ones that we're trying to cultivate more in the city are kind of deemed, And then also there was a really interesting discussion, I thought, tonight around the ecosystem and trying to encourage that and that being such a benefit. And so if there's a way to integrate that into our existing ordinances, that would be lovely. And last parting thought, I have to say, listening to the developer come in and talk about what his takeaway from NAP and how he really seemed to learn a lot from that, and it was really great to hear. I thought we learned a lot, and he learned a lot, it sounded like, about how to make that development a little bit better.
Commissioner Gabrandel.
Quick response. Just so you know, Environmental Commission is actually looking at, there's a subcommittee that's looking at the natural features. And one of the pieces that I asked them to look at was to create a heritage tree category that it's species related, but it's also size related, that is just kind of upping the ante on the landmark thing for the really, like the bur oaks that are 5 feet across in diameter. Those kinds of things. We don't have a lot of them. There's not a lot of them around, but that they get a different designation. So that's one thing that's in the works right now. But I will bring up the whole kind of ecosystem thing too, in terms of the woodlands, to see if there's some way to incentivize that. Because we do have this great resource, I think, with NAP, that is something that we have as a city that not very many cities do, really, frankly. But we also can't put a lot of pressure on them to be checking sites all the time either. So it's a little sticky, but it would be great to figure out how to incentivize that in some way without burdening staff a lot too, so.
I was just going to say, as far as incentivizing that, it made me think of some of the past frustrations that this board has had with the planned project criteria. That there's, I think the spirit of those criteria are in the avenues that we're interested in, but they might not have the specificity. That's the kind of thing that I think of, maybe we could improve that framework to say, when we're talking about natural resource protection above and beyond the ordinance requirements, this is what we mean.
Yeah,
Sort of like, instead of solar ready, we mean providing solar panels.
right.
Just an idea.
Right, yeah.
Anybody?
done.
Anybody else?
That's 8. It's 8 last-minute items.
Do you
So
still
I-
love us, Brett?
All right, on that note, do I have a motion to adjourn? Moved by Commissioner Gabrandel, seconded by Commissioner Mills. All those in favor? We are adjourned. Thank you.